Back here, Weekend Joe, driven by Munganass St. Louis Acura and Munganass Alton Toyota here on ClavesOnline.com. Wrapping up a week of winter meetings and all kinds of baseball news here in December. By welcoming in from Sporting News, he is Ryan Fagan. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Everything in the baseball world right now. These were the winter meetings we always dream of, right? So many times the winter meetings come and go, and we see maybe a signing or two here, and then the big guys sign in January or February. But this is what we wanted. This was the excitement, and it started early with DeGrom, and it never seemed to let up.
So you weren't in San Diego, and I know this was kind of the first big winter meeting that we've had since December of 2019. Do you regret not being there, or doing your job now? Do you kind of was there a lot that you could have done there? And I know, however you answer too, I understand you're going to say whatever needs to get you to the winter meetings next year if that's what you want.
Yeah, I think in these times we have to make decisions with money and travel budgets, and as we were talking about, with the World Baseball Classic coming this spring, that's an awfully enticing thing to be there and to be there for those games and to witness that environment, because the winter meetings, they're fun, right? It's good to see colleagues, and it's good to get a chance to interact with the managers and some GMs and these types of things. If we would have known everything that went down this week would have gone down, maybe we would have reassessed a little bit. But, I think it's still, you got that feeling, even if you weren't in San Diego, what it felt like to be there, the buzz in the air. You heard, on Twitter, you'd see reporters talking about it. The lobby is going crazy right now, especially when the rumors of Aaron Judge to San Francisco started to pick up. So it was quite the winter meetings event, even from here in St. Louis.
I know, amazing that MLB Network was able to go live basically from people's cell phones. They were able to get their talent just, okay, hey, you know what? We need to patch you in somehow. It's 5 a.m. out there. I get it, but we need to get you on and talk Judge. That was pretty cool to see them breaking into whatever they had to bring you. I mean, what really is, $40 million a year, and just the story that surrounds it really is one of the coolest free agent stories that I think we've seen in baseball.
Yeah, and we'll get to Judge in a second, but I'm glad you brought up the MLB Network. They did a good job, and I even, I talked with a friend that I have there, and I just said, kudos on getting things going, because the previous couple of days, they would just run reruns of the MLB Tonight from the previous night. They would run those until I think 9 a.m. so 7 a.m. West Coast time out there in San Diego. But when the Judge news broke at like 5:20 a.m., the first text message went out, and then there was just this immediate response and text messages going out and emails going out, and they really rallied their troops to get the coverage that was needed for a signing like that. And it's not just because Aaron Judge is a Yankee, right? It's not just that East Coast bias, the Yankee bias. It really was this guy who did incredible things last year, who bet on himself the way that he did, to see that he basically turned 62 home runs in 2022 into $146 million, right? And if you want to look at it that way, that's like $2.35 million per home run, because he bet on himself, and he really did come through with a season that, not just he needed, but the Yankees, you look at that Yankees lineup, right? Last year, outside of him, and Anthony Rizzo was solid, fine. Outside of that, you had a lot of guys who swung and missed a lot. You had a lot of guys who didn't make regular contact, who didn't regularly drive the ball. And the fact that lineup, when you look at it in its totality, was part of a team that won 62 games, really is a testament to Judge and the other, especially the pitching pieces that the Yankees had last year.
Not 62 games. They won. How many games did the Yankees win?
99 games.
Yeah,
99.
Yeah.
I got the 62 from Judge stuck in my head, right?
But the thing is, though, and we can start diving into it. Yeah, what next for the Yankees? And we'll let's stay with Judge. Let's stay there, because we have seen the Yankees. We always know how big of spenders they are, and we know they're the Yankees, and they went out and they got Garrett Cole a few years ago and gave him one of the biggest pitching contracts that we've ever. Was it the biggest pitching contract we ever saw in the history of baseball at that time that they gave Garrett Cole? And now they're giving Aaron Judge the biggest contract that we've ever seen a player get, a position player get in baseball history. what next though? What else can they do? Because you just mentioned all their issues last year. They haven't signed anybody else.
Yeah, they have a lot of work to do, and I think part of the work that they have to do is cutting loose of players who are no longer productive, who are no longer worthy of being in a World Series contending lineup, and that's hard to do. They just gave Aaron Judge a lot of money. They're going to have to eat a lot of money. Actually, working on a column right now for SportingNews.com. I mean, you look at that lineup, right? You know, Josh Donaldson, you know, Kiner Falefa at shortstop, Aaron Hicks in the outfield, and even the catching spot. These are all positions where they got an OPS plus under 100, and in some cases significantly under 100. You're talking about 4 to 5 positions in the lineup where they had hitters that were 5 to 15% worse than the average player, the average hitter at those positions. You know, in some positions you can accept that, right? Jose Trevino was fantastic as a catcher, right? They wouldn't trade it. That they're okay with him producing an OPS of 95, right? That's okay because he's so good behind the plate and all these other things he brings. And you know, the Cardinals know that you can get away with that if you get production in other ways out of the catching spot. The Astros, I mean, they won a World Series with Martin Maldonado basically doing nothing offensively behind the plate. And you can get away with that if you have the lineup to kind of make that okay. And the Yankees don't. And it's not looking like Josh Donaldson. It's not like he's 27, right? And he's going to turn around because he was just injured. You know, it's not like Aaron Hicks is a spring chicken anymore. Like he's just going to turn it around. You know, Kiner Falefa, he is basically, he was last year what he kind of was with the Rangers beforehand. So, you know, I think that they're going to have some tough decisions to make because just getting those bats out of the lineup and not giving, you know, 1,500 plate appearances to guys who are going to be that far under league average, that's something they have to seriously look at. So you can give Aaron Judge all the money you want, but you might have to eat some of that money just to, you know, increase your production at some pretty key spots.
Can't you say that? I mean, when you look at all of Major League Baseball, and you know, if you look at, okay, no offensive production out of the catcher, but you can still win, and no,
Right.
you know, a defensive-minded shortstop or second baseman. I mean, if you have 7 good hitters in the lineup, it doesn't matter what positions they're
Right.
playing. It's, you know, you just need to find those guys and kind of understand, okay, you know what, we're going to take a hit here, but that guy's good defensively, and maybe he'll save us a couple. And I think that's what the Cardinals have done a lot recently with, and maybe they've cut ties with that. I mean, you saw them trade away Bader, a
Right.
Gold Glove outfielder, and you know, they might part ways with Tyler O'Neill, another Gold Glove outfielder, and just say, you know what, hey, the offense just wasn't there for us to be able to put up with this defense anymore.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is you can do that with one spot in your lineup,
Yeah.
2 spots in your lineup, maybe you because it's I'm not saying it's wrong to prioritize defense, but like you look at the Yankees and they had a defensive minded catcher who didn't hit. They had a defensive minded shortstop who didn't hit. They had a defensive minded third baseman, not that he wanted to be, but that's what Josh Donaldson essentially was last year, who didn't hit. They gave 500 plate appearances to Aaron Hicks, who didn't hit, right? And all of a sudden you're looking at you only get 9 spots in the lineup, right? And if you've got 4 of them where you're not producing. And then Joey Gallo, before he was traded, got 270 some odd plate appearances. So some nights had 5 positions in the lineup where you weren't hitting. And that's not good enough if you want to compete for championships. You know, they won 99 games. They won the American League East. They made it to the ALCS, but then they weren't competitive really very much in that series, got swept by the Astros in the ALCS. And, you know, when you look at the Cardinals, we saw, especially in that postseason, when you're facing ace type pitchers that you're going to see in the postseason, like Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, you can't have 4 to 5 spots, really even 3 spots where you're not getting competitive at bats. And I think especially when a guy like Paul Goldschmidt, who was so good all year, wasn't his normal self, you know, then you really saw that show up in just the almost complete lack of offense in that wild card series against the Phillies.
Switching gears here, I'm glad you brought up Gallo because it does kind of tie into the Yankees too, and a guy like Matt Carpenter. Those are guys that, you know, we know where they're hitting the baseball. We know when if they make contact, we know where the baseball is going. This year, one of the biggest rule changes is going to be the shift that we're going to see in baseball. It's going to be really fascinating to see the kind of deals and where guys like that end up, because you would have to assume if the defense isn't allowed to play them the way they have in the past, their numbers are going to go up and they're going to be more productive, right?
It makes sense that would happen, right? And I think part of what the shift did was it it induced hitters, especially left-handed hitters, to try to get the ball in the air, right? Because they basically said, we're not going to be able to become opposite field hitters. Some of these guys, it's not something we're going to be able to do to make that adjustment in the major league level. So what we have to do is then hit the ball over everybody. So then you're changing your swing patterns. And I think that led to some of the strikeout rates you see with some of these players. Some guys like Anthony Rizzo, he adjusted, and it helped that he went to Yankee Stadium where, that porch was very favorable to him. And I think that's why a lot of people thought that Joey Gallo would be there too. And he didn't succeed in New York for other reasons. But yeah, I mean, there was essentially for, almost 100 years, you had a spot in short right field where every left-handed hitter could hit a line drive, and it was a single every time. If it snuck past the right fielder, it was a double or a triple. That for the last 5-10 years has been gone. That's been an out. That's been a ground out. That's been, a 4-3 or a 5-3 sometimes when the third baseman shifts all the way over to that spot. It's not been something that's been available to them. We tell our 4-year-old daughter something if she can't have it. This is not available to you. Well, it's not been available to these left-handed pull hitters for a long time, and now it is, right? And you're still going to see second baseman with range. You're going to see them shifted over, but they can't play that deep, right? So those line drives that don't carry out to the right fielder, that have been outs for a long time, now that's still going to get over the second baseman who's playing with, his feet on the very back of the dirt. I'm not a huge fan of the shift as a philosophy because you're impacting strategy. I don't like necessarily rules that impact strategy. Like the pitch clock, I love it. I think it's going to be fantastic. I think you're going to see some hiccups early. I think you're going to see umpires catching fire for enforcing it. But you talk to the players who have come up through the minor leagues where they've had a pitch clock for a long time. They love it, right? You talk to pitchers who go down, whether it's on a rehab assignment, whatever, they like it. They hate it right away, but I think they like it. I think we'll get used to that. I think that's going to be a good thing for baseball. But the shift, I mean, I get why they want to do it, right? Because you're not going to be able to make pitchers throw slower, right? You can't legislate that. So I think what you're trying to do in increasing offense is to put that spot, put the ability to have more singles, more doubles, that the numbers and the shifts are taking away. But again, I have, philosophically a problem with impacting strategies and saying, okay, you got too good at this, and now you can't do it anymore. I'm not sure about that.
Let's talk locally. Let's talk about the Cardinals and what they did yesterday, a move that we all saw coming. It didn't surprise anybody and shouldn't have if you've been paying attention to anything Cardinal related since June or July. Wilson Contreras, 5 years, $87.5 million. The former Cub World Series winner comes to St. Louis to be the face that replaces Yadier Molina behind the plate. We all knew it was coming, I think, for the most part. Any hangups at all about that deal that they ended up making with him?
No, I think it's going to be a very good deal for the Cardinals. And they didn't overpay. I mean, in an ideal world, maybe you only give him 4 years, but I think when you look at what the market has shown over the past week and some of the deals that have happened, to get a starting all-star caliber catcher for $17.5 million on an average annual value, that's a good deal, right? For 5 years. That's not extending yourself. That's not prohibitive. I mean, Xander Bogaerts is a fantastic shortstop. I don't think anyone in a million years thought he was going to get 11 years and $280 million. These are mind-boggling numbers. And, the Cardinals have been connected to shortstops, the shortstop market. And then you see Trey Turner getting what he got, Bogarts getting what he got. And, all of a sudden Dansby Swanson, who a lot of people in the industry thought maybe get, $135 to $150 million. All of a sudden he looks like a $200 million player. And is, what teams are going to do that? It doesn't seem like the Cardinals are going to do that, especially because they went out and they took care of the biggest need, because catcher was the biggest need, and Contreras is a guy that he's athletic enough, he could play a corner outfield spot if he needed to. He can, eventually learn to play first base if he needed to, if Goldschmidt is out for short times, he's not going to be a full-time guy there, but he, and obviously he can DH too, to keep that bat in the lineup, and that's what we talked about earlier. When you have these holes in your lineup, and that's what it was for the Cardinals last year. Molina had some big hits. There's no doubt about it. He seemed to be able to tap into that that Yadier Molina gene that still runs so strong, even if he wasn't consistently the hitter. He had some big moments, there's no doubt. But Contreras is a massive upgrade over Molina and Andrew Kisner offensively. And so you're seeing that one big need the Cardinals had taken care of. And I think that was a very good start to the offseason. Now you wonder how the shortstop chase is going to look. All of a sudden, Tommy Edman looks a lot better at shortstop now than he did last night before Xander Bogaerts got $280 million and reset that. Because, I mean, you look at it too. Edman's a good defensive shortstop, obviously. And if you have Edman as the shortstop and then a second base combo of Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman, with Donovan being able to move around and shifting where he needs to be, look, Nolan Gorman wasn't a great defensive second baseman last year. He wasn't horrible, and he's still learning the position. I remember talking to him, I think it was 2 off seasons ago, and I spent 25 30 minutes on the phone with him. He was talking about the transition to second base. It's a big difference, right? You're completely learning a new position, and he was doing it under a lot of scrutiny, not just in the majors, but in the minors. So I think the more time he gets another off season, he's going to be still a good hitter, and he's got to work on some of the holes in his swing, right? He swings and misses, I think a little bit more than the Cardinals were expecting, certainly more than they would like. But again, he's young, another off season. I think that when you see the alternative is paying a guy like Dansby Swanson, and I love Dansby Swanson. He's a really good player. Every Braves fan will tell you he is a streaky hitter. When he's on fire, he's going to carry a team. But when he's not, he's a guy. There's a reason he was hitting 7th and 8th in the lineup for a long portion of the last couple of years where the Braves have been successful. And to give that kind of a contract to that guy when the Cardinals are trying to do what they are budgetarily, whether they have to or whether they're just trying to is another question, but that's the reality of how they're looking at it. Again, the middle infield combo of Edman at shortstop and Donovan and Gorman at second base doesn't look so bad.
No, and when you look at all the other pieces there too, Yepes and Nootbaar and Carlson and O'Neill, that's, those 4 in your outfield and DHing, and you seem to have all these pieces in place that make a starting 9 in baseball. Plus you have 7 starting guys that are capable of being starting pitchers. I don't see where the rush is in the Cardinal organization now when they look around and they go, all right, like, what's our competition look like in this division right now? Like, how many wins is it going to take to win the NL Central? Okay, why should we go give a $200 or $200 million contract to somebody when we could just make trades at the deadline again?
And I think, and that's where you're going to see how the Cardinals are looking at this, right? I think there's 2 ways to look at it, right? One is you get into the postseason, a lot of things can happen, right? And the Cardinals are in very good position to get into the postseason. I think on the short list of teams that are in good position to get into the postseason, the Cardinals are right up at the top there
because to win the division. I mean, right, I think if you are going to look, if you're going to handicap every team in the National League's odds to win their division, I would have to say the Cardinals have the best odds to win their division. When you look at the Padres and the Dodgers in the National League West, and you look at everything going on in the NL East right now, they would have to be the best odds to win a division right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But the question is that the goal, right? Because the Padres, they don't care about the division. If you ask the Padres, are you going to win the NL West, they would say, we don't care. That's not the goal, because they know, and they showed last year, you get into the postseason and you've got a lineup like they do, and you've got the starting pitching that they do. And, we saw them already spend very heavily to keep a couple of relievers, and Robert Suarez and Nick Martinez, that were big pieces of last year's team. We saw them spend very heavily to bring them back. And their goal is to win a World Series, and they're spending like their goal is to win a World Series. Whether they were ever seriously contenders in Aaron Judge's mind, they made the significant offer to bring him to San Diego. They made a significant offer to bring Trey Turner to San Diego. They gave Xander Bogaerts more than anyone expected him to get, because they wanted to win a World Series. And I think they look at it as they've got a window, because Manny Machado has an opt-out that's coming up soon. Juan Soto, for as big as the trade was, he's a free agent in 2 years. So they looked at it and they said, okay, well, we could conceivably be starting the 2025 season without Machado or Soto, what are we going to do? Right. So they went out and they signed Xander Bogaerts because they want to win a World Series. Now, if the Cardinals want to win a World Series, there's more to do. If they want to get in the postseason, roll the dice and see how things play out, could the roster as set up right now win a World Series? I don't know. I don't think the starting pitching is that level. The starting pitching is absolutely at the level to win the NL Central, though, and I don't think there's much doubt about that.
What do you think is going through a guy like Nolan Arenado's mind right now when he looks at some of the 30-40 million dollar contracts that are out there? And he stayed. He didn't want to go through all of that. And it's, I guess if you believe the reports, he was told, he was assured that this team was going to make a run at a World Series. And yeah, they're a playoff team, but as you just mentioned, you don't think they're a World Series team.
I think part of that has to do with the starting pitching. I think you look at the way that teams win in the postseason, and it's having guys who can go out and strike guys out and miss bats, and they have that in the bullpen, right? And Steven Matz is the guy who's your best strikeout starting pitcher. I know his numbers were very good, but he didn't do it over a full season because he missed time. That's the question: is can a rotation that has guys like Miles Michaelis and Adam Wainwright, and can they go out there and be the type of team over a month against the best hitters in baseball that goes on a run and wins World Series? I mean, possibly, it absolutely could happen. But if you're stacking up rotations, you look at what the Astros had. I mean, they had guys like, Luis Garcia and Jose Urquidy who were really good. They would be like the number 2 or 3 guy in the Cardinals rotation. They were bullpen pieces last year in the postseason because that's how good the Astros were and how many swing and miss guys they had, not just in the bullpen. And they had a lot of them in the bullpen, as we saw time and time again, but in the rotation too. And I think that's the question. And, part of the swing and miss thing in the rotation is if you have swing and miss guys in June and July, you're ending sooner, which means you're not getting to the bullpen as quickly. So it's kind of a cumulative effect too, when you just have ground ball contact guys and, pitchers who are going to have 10 to 12 pitch at bats on a game to game basis because they're getting a lot of foul balls, right? I think that's the question. If you're looking at how do the Cardinals make the quickest path to becoming a more serious World Series contender now that they have Contreras and they've addressed one of the gaping holes in the lineup, I think that's the quickest way to do it.
So right now, Dansby Swanson, he the biggest free agent out there?
I'd still say it's Carlos Rodon right now. I think if you're looking at the biggest, the most impactful guy, I think it's Carlos Rodon.
So as we sit here then, knowing how the Cardinals operate, who's out there that they could trade for?
That's a good question. I mean, the reality is the trade market is much more open than the free agent market because either you are a free agent or you're not. But if you're a guy who is potentially available, it depends on what the offer is, right? I think, and so there's so many other guys who could be potentially traded for. And the Cardinals have the farm system that if they decide that's what they want to do, they could do it. And I think that's one of the things. I know a lot of Cardinals fans wanted Sean Murphy, and they heard all about Sean Murphy and all these different things, but Sean Murphy cost players and then money, right? And now that they got Wilson Contreras for, the steal line from Jeff Jones from the Globe Democrat for just money, right? Now they still have those prospects and this farm depth if they want to go out and get impact starting pitcher to slide in the number 1, number 2, number 3 spots in the rotation. Now they can do that too. Whereas those starting pitchers may not be available on the market now that we've seen guys like, Taijuan Walker go for what he did. I thought the Mets got a fantastic deal in Jose Quintana, 2 years, $26 million. That, as much as the Xander Bogaerts number made me say, wow, the Quintana number almost did the same thing for the opposite reason. He seems like such a steal with as good as he was last year. He would have looked good in that Cardinals rotation again. But I think that, at some point this year, if the Cardinals feel like they are really World Series contenders, it could happen now. I don't expect them to sign Carlos Rodon, but I think they understand what he represents and what he would be at the top of that rotation. But at some point before we get to August, if the Cardinals feel like they're serious World Series contenders, you're going to see another another arm at the top of that rotation, near the top of that rotation.
I asked Bob Ramsey this question yesterday when after we did our show when Wilson Contreras signed, so I'll ask you, because I think this is one of the biggest things hanging over the heads right now of the Cardinals front office is what will Jordan Walker be for the team in 2023? Does the Cardinals front office want Jordan Walker to be in the lineup on opening day?
That's a good question. Opening day, I'm not sure. He doesn't have a lot of time in the higher levels of the minors, and for every guy like Julio Rodriguez we see who comes in and has a big impact right away, there are guys who need that time in the minors. And, I don't know that the service time thing is quite as big of a deal now that you get there are incentives for bringing guys up and getting them in right away and winning Rookie of the Year awards. You get extra draft picks and all these things that helps. I think here's the thing: if the Cardinals go into spring training and they give Jordan Walker a lot of at bats, which I think you're going to see, unless there's some sort of injury issue, you're going to see him get a lot of at bats. They have the luxury that maybe a team like the Braves or the Padres or the Dodgers or the Mets, the Phillies, teams that are competing in, as we talked about, very tight divisions. The Cardinals have the luxury of being able to give Jordan Walker at bats in the bigs early on. If he shows in the spring training, he could be there and still win the division. Mm-hmm. Right. We saw, even as good as Julio Rodriguez was last year, the first couple weeks of the season, he struggled. He looked overmatched at times. He looked like he was going to steal bases when he got on base, but he wasn't getting on base a whole lot. And then he adjusted and he got there. Jordan Walker is a prodigious talent. He's a guy that I think could absolutely be the big bat that they need. He's the guy that could be good enough. And I know Cardinals fans want a left-handed bat in that lineup, and ideally that would come. But Jordan Walker is the kind of guy like Arenado and Goldschmidt who could be good enough that it doesn't matter what side of the plate he stands on. He really is a ridiculous talent. I'm excited to see what he can do. I don't think it's imperative that they start him at the big league level for opening day unless he shows in the spring training that he's earned that shot.
Ryan Fagan, Sporting News. Ryan, look forward to the next time I get to see you. Maybe it'll be down at the World Baseball Classic. We'll touch base and we'll see if we can work that out.
Yep, we'll make it happen.
Ryan, thank you so much.
Enjoyed it, Joe. Thanks.